Welcome to Keto Life Support, where we make your keto life sustainable, fun, and low stress. I'm Kim Howerton, and I'll be coming to you weekly with some of my keto besties to bring you the practical, real-world keto advice that you need. Quick disclaimer, I am not a doctor, and even if we do have a doctor in the house from time to time, he or she is not your doctor, and nothing we say on this show should be taken as medical advice. Always check in with a trusted medical professional about your own personal medical concerns. Hello and welcome to Keto Life Support. This is episode number 61. And I'm coming to you today to talk about, well, this might seem a little bit off topic maybe because it's not really exactly just keto, it's just sort of life. I've been thinking, and I kind of enjoy talking about broader topics sometimes because really, ultimately, living a healthy life is not as complicated in terms of the how-to as it is the how to not get completely derailed, right? And so some of the things that I talk about are ways we can actually just keep our life on track better because we often turn to food to fill in places, to shore us up, to comfort us, to help us navigate the world, to protect us, to medicate us. And so when we're starting to, or on the journey to unravel our unhealthy entanglement with the way that we have eaten in the past, sometimes we get to places where we're going to need to go a little deeper into some of the emotional topics. And so I've been percolating on this specific topic recently, and it's not a new one. It's one I talked about in my coaching for years before it was ever keto. And specifically, actually, I talked about it a lot in the arena of couples or relationships, romantic or familial relationships. And it is about complaints. But recently, I've been thinking, gosh, this really applies across a wide variety. So we're going to delve a little bit deeper into this. And, mostly this is here to tickle your brain cells a little bit to think, what could I learn from this? And how could this help me be a more emotionally resilient person? And by being more emotionally resilient, you're able to function in the world without the crutch that food once played. So hopefully you enjoy that we're kind of expanding out a little here and there, little emotional topics, because ultimately we don't fail because the food is complicated. We fail because our life is complicated and the food is a crutch that we help to make our life, well, not less complicated, but maybe a little more soothed, right? So here's what it is. Complaining is something a lot of us do. I was going to say we all do, but I'm sure there are some people that would be like, no, I never complain. I don't know. I mean, there are also some people that just aren't emotionally honest with themselves, but, I digress. A complaint is a festering request. Now think about that for a second. So when we have a complaint, it's actually a unheard or often undelivered, right? They're two sides of the same coin, request. So like in a relationship context, right? Imagine you're sitting on the sofa with your partner and you're having a wonderful day and things seem fine. And suddenly they turn to you and they say, you never take out the garbage. I hate that. Right? That's a complaint, right? And you feel, what do you feel? You feel attacked. You're like, well, where is this even coming from? Well, we're not even talking about the garbage. What's happened? And you just feel kind of blindsided, right? Now, this partner may or may not have somewhere between 1 and 10,000 times asked you to take out the garbage. I'm sorry, 0 to 1,000, right? 0 to countless times. Could be 0. And I know I'm guilty of this in expecting my partner often to be a mind reader. And so I will feel a complaint well up about something they are or aren't doing. But tracing this back to personal responsibility if I have gotten something to the level where I want to complain about it, and this is right now I'm talking about someone else. We'll go deeper. But if I have a complaint about someone else, if I trace that complaint back far enough, there is a request that was either unexamined, unexplained, unconfirmed, right? There's a seed. There's a seed of that complaint. Now, that seed, as I had stated, may or may not have been well communicated. And so anytime I have a complaint, it is my job, right? My job, my complaint, my job to trace that back and figure out, well, what is this actually about? Now, sometimes, being human, we don't realize we have a complaint until it is burst from our mouth in a very unappealing way. And we're like, oh, that was unattractive, right? But you reel it back in, you take responsibility for your words, you reel it back in and you say, okay, what was going on there? What's going on there? And you might, I remember when I was a teenager and there was a boy I had a crush on and I said something mean to him one day, like just mean. And we were friends and he was like, well, what was that about? Why are you being mean to me? And I traced it back and I was like, oh, I didn't say this out loud, but I was like, oh, I like him and I've never expressed anything about it. And I feel I have a complaint that he's not paying attention to me. Right? So it's like, oh, what's the actual thing under the complaint? And time after time, it is a festering desire, I should say. Sometimes a request, sometimes a desire. They're similar, right? So a complaint is a festering desire. And usually the reason it's festering, right? You guys know what festering means, right? Like it's like a wound that's like infected and pussy and bleh, right? So it's festering. That was the way it's described in medical textbooks, right? So it's festering. It's gotten really yucky because you have not dealt with the core issue. So it's just like in a partnership, it might be something very small, like, we have an agreement that you take out the garbage and I do the dishes, and you haven't been taking the garbage and I haven't been doing the dishes, and we're like passive aggressively not doing a thing. And we're, like, if you've been in a relationship, 99 out of 100 of you have experienced some version of this happening, right? And so I just want to point out today that this is clearer in a relationship context, but you can broaden the scope and you can look at, overall, where do I have a complaint? Because one of the things that will change your life more than anything else is really getting to the nitty-gritty of where you complain. Now, some of us have a tendency to complain more than others. Some of us who are sarcastic, I won't point fingers at myself here, but I am, sometimes complaints can be used for comedy. But even then, you are required to get to the root of it, to be emotionally honest with it. Because whenever we are complaining in a way that puts the blame somewhere else, right, we are abdicating that ability to be empowered, right? Because if this is somebody else's fault, we can't fix it. So we're like, oh, hands off, not me, not me. When did we do that? When we were kids, right? Not me, not it. But here's the real winning realization. If you can get to where your part is in anything, you have control and you have an ability to shift the way that is all going down. And so if there are things you don't like, it would behoove you to understand your part in that thing you don't like, rather than, just tossing the ball to somebody else. And so the reason I want to go a little deeper here as well is one, this will just be good for your relationships to start to see this place where if anytime you're like that complaint is on the tip of your tongue, to stop it and do a little investigation about, okay, let me trace this thread back. Okay, my complaint is about the dishes, whatever, fill in the blank. And then trace it back like, okay, well, what is my complaint? My complaint is that you didn't do them, right? Simple, right? And then it's like, well, have I clearly communicated my expectation that these would be done? And why are we on a different page? And so sometimes it's a conversation that would happen between two people. Sometimes it's just getting clear. Like, have I invented a promise that was never made? Because I do that, right? Like, I'm like, we agreed that I do this and you do this. And then you bring it up like verbally and you're like, they have to say like, where was I when we agreed to this? Because I don't think I was in that discussion. It's like, oh, I like invented this whole thing in my head because it just made sense that, well, if I'm going to do this, then you'll do that. And I never actually communicated that that was my expectation, but I digress. But one thing you can do is also look at this within yourself. So like I said, the larger concept, it's easier to understand when it involves other people. However, we also do it to ourselves, right? Like, you probably have some complaints about yourself. These are ways in which you judge yourself, you are harsh to yourself, you are mean to yourself, you have expectations that you do not fulfill, right? Like, you say to yourself, you're going to follow through on eating in a certain way, exercising a certain way, living in a certain way, making some sort of change, and then you don't do it. And then you have to ask yourself, well, what's going on there? Why didn't I do it? And so often we come at ourselves just like we're with anger and with judgment and like, well, why didn't you do it? You're just a dumbass, those kinds of feelings. And we direct them at ourselves, not just other people. And again, you need to get curious and say, what was the underlying desire, right? So it's like, I said I was going to make my lunch every day this week, and I didn't do it. And instead of just complaining about yourself to yourself, as we do, you could say, well, why? What was the step I missed? What was the step I missed? What was the actual desire? What was the actual request? What was the agreement I made? Right? Just like you would with somebody else in that relationship. And so you said you wanted an outcome, but you never made a plan to get to that outcome. Well, how are you going to expect that to actually happen? If you don't communicate with your partner that you expect them to take out the garbage because you're doing the dishes and you can't do both at the same time and they have to happen in the same time frame, and how does that sound? And then negotiate from there. Maybe your partner, he or she, is like, no, I'd rather do the dishes and you take out the garbage. Well, let's talk about it. Let's see what's best. Well, with yourself, it would be, I expected you to take lunch to work every day this week and you didn't. And it's like, well, did you put time on our calendar to make the lunch the night before? Right? Like, I know I'm making me sound like we have split personalities, but you have to treat yourself that same way. Like, really, when you make deep assumptions and just assume something's going to happen, but you haven't put the work in to put the steps in to make the communication, even with yourself, and the plan of how this is going to happen, having these complaints about who you are and the way you're doing things, it's not about the outcome. The complaint is an opportunity to trace it back and say, did I lay the groundwork to get to the successful end goal that I wanted to here? So if you have a complaint about your actions, there was a request that you made of yourself that didn't happen, obviously, right? That complaint is because you're not getting the outcome you desired. But just like when you're working with another person, you have to say, okay, wait, did I fully communicate every single detail that I wanted to happen to get this end result? And I know it seems really crazy to say, like, did I communicate the details to myself? But you didn't. You didn't have those thoughts. You didn't have that discussion. You have that planning session with yourself. And so whenever you have a complaint, I want you to start to look at it as an opportunity for growth. So ultimately, I think complaints really they're the negative outcome, right? They are the proof that something has gone wrong in the process. You shouldn't be getting to the complaint. Like, if everything was going really well, you'd have no complaints, right? And that kind of makes sense. So complaint is proof that there's a problem and that something fell through the cracks, and you have to trace it back to what went wrong. Okay, guys, I hope that's helpful for you to understand that there's always a route to get to. And from there, when you get to that nucleus, get to that core issue, you can fix it. You can say, well, I had this complaint that's out here, You can't see me, but I'm gesturing broadly. It's out here on the outer layer. I have this complaint. The complaint is proof that something went wrong earlier in the process. And if I can trace that back and fix that process, either with another person or with myself, I can have the grace to say, no one here in relationship with you is a bad person. So there must just be a miscommunication. So let's fix that miscommunication. So in a relationship with someone else, communicate your expectations, negotiate the outcomes that you want and the things that you're willing to give and take and do. And then the same thing with your relationship with yourself. Communicate with yourself in a clear manner what your expectations are, and not just what you expect the outcome to be, but how you expect that outcome to come about. Because lots of things feel magical in the world, but what is that expression? Luck favors the prepared. So you might believe that magic or luck exists, but it will come to those who did the preparation, put all the things in place so that that light can be shown upon them, right? And so do the groundwork, do the work, fix the underlying issues around your clarity of thought, clarity of communication, and the end result will be that you get the end result you want. All right. I hope this was a little bit mind expanding for some of you. And just every time you find yourself falling into complaint, just remind yourself, you can just silently be like, what is the festering desire? What is the thing that I wanted that I'm not getting? What is the thing that did not get properly communicated? Even if you feel like, I said it like 10,000 times, communication is not just a one-way street. It's not just you saying something. It's not just one direction. It's that thing that you said is received. It's that you made sure transmission occurred, that understanding happened, right? That's also your responsibility, to be actively engaged and involved in that process until you get that green light. And so hopefully this improves not just your relationship with others, but also your relationship with yourself. Take care, guys, and I'll see you next week. Well, I won't see you, but you will be hearing from me. But that sounds kind of ominous. Take care, and you'll be hearing from me next week. All right. Can you tell I'm recording this late in the evening and I'm a little loopy? So hopefully you guys enjoy, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Keto Life Support. Want more information? Want show notes? Want to suggest a topic? Just head over to ketolifesupport.com. That's where all that kind of thing can go on. By the way, I have a request. If you could go to your podcast host and hit subscribe, we would really, really appreciate it. And what would be even more awesome is if you could write a review. And what would be even more awesome than that is if you could write like a really flattering review. Just asking, you do you. All right. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm thrilled that you're part of the Keto fam. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.